My wife, Daphne, doesn't love me. She doesn't love our child either. On the day our son was born, she threw him into my arms without even taking a look at him. Later, her first love, Ethan, came back from abroad. The woman who had always been cold got dead drunk at home for the first time. She held our child in her arms with a smile on her face. Surprised, our son wrapped his arms around the woman's neck and whispered to me, "Dad, what's wrong with Auntie?" I squatted down and held him in my arms, explaining with red eyes, "The person Auntie likes is back, so we shouldn't bother her anymore. We're going to move out." After taking my son back to the room and putting him to sleep, I returned to the guest room, turned on the computer, and started drafting the divorce agreement. This year is the 7th year of my marriage to Daphne. It's also the 7th year we've been living apart. Now, I've finally decided to let go of her. Bang, bang. The door opened. My 7-year-old son, Julian, holding a model airplane, came to find me. "Dad, are we really going to move out?" He looked at me with eyes full of reluctance. "But Annie hugged me last night. Does that mean she's starting to like me?" I was stunned for a moment, feeling a bit dazed. In the 7 years of our marriage, Daphne never allowed our son to call her mom. When our son was 2 years old, she took him to the supermarket. On the way, they met an acquaintance. Because our son accidentally called her mom, she put the son, who had just learned to walk, on the ground and made him walk home by himself. When we got home, our son had fallen down countless times, and his knees and palms were all skinned. When our son was 4 years old, he begged for a long time before Daphne agreed to take him to an amusement park. Again, because of an unintentional mom from our son, Daphne let go of his hand. She made a 4-year-old child get lost in the crowd. When we found him again, our son was hiding in a bush, crying so hard that he almost ran out of oxygen. Since then, our son learned to call her Auntie, and our family has completely become a joke. Thinking of this, my nose turned sour, and I couldn't help but pull my son into my arms. "Julian, the person Auntie likes is coming back, and we can't stay in this house any longer." My son's eyes dimmed. Then, he quickly held the model airplane in his hand in front of me. "But, Dad, Auntie gave me a gift tonight. If she doesn't like me, why would she give me a gift?" My son's expression was so eager to prove that he was a child loved by his mother. I opened my mouth, but I couldn't say a word. What should I say? What can I say? Should I tell him that Daphne is happy because her first love is coming back? Or should I tell him that this gift is actually due to another uncle? I couldn't say anything. I could only silently swallow the bitterness and sadness in my heart. Just like before, I used a whitewashed truth to protect my child. I kissed my son's forehead and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes where he couldn't see. This is an illusion that a father has to maintain even when he's in extreme pain. Holding back the urge to sob, I smiled and said, "Julian, if Dad wants to take you away from Auntie, would you be willing?" My son's body stiffened for a moment. Then, he whispered, "Can't we stay?" I haven't called her mom openly yet. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore, and I bit my lips tightly. "Julian, Auntie, she doesn't want us to stay in her house. Dad will take you away, okay?" My son retracted his hand and hugged the model airplane tightly in his arms. After a long silence, he said, "I want to give Auntie 3 more chances. If she really doesn't like us, we'll leave her forever." Closing my eyes, I agreed to my son's request. "Okay, Daphne, my son and I will give you 3 more chances. After 3 chances, there will never be a place for you in our family again." Today is Friday, and it's also the day Daphne's first love came back from abroad. They were college lovers and got engaged after graduation. Unexpectedly, a month before the wedding, Ethan fell in love at first sight with a French woman. He left Daphne without hesitation and went to France to pursue his true love. Since then, the two went their separate ways. Daphne was depressed for a long time because of him. That's when I became her assistant. After getting drunk one time, we had a child. I also became her underground husband, and my child was also not treated well by her. After printing out the divorce agreement I drafted yesterday, I started preparing my resignation letter. Unlike my son, I'm used to Daphne's coldness and ruthlessness, and I won't foolishly wait for a promiscuous woman to change her ways. 7 years is long enough to shatter all my illusions. "Lucas, do you really plan to resign?" A colleague glanced at my computer screen and asked me in a low voice. I smiled and came up with the excuse I had prepared beforehand. Yes, the child's mother is abroad, and I plan to take the child with me to be with her. We want to be a reunited family. My colleague nodded. That's good. It's really hard for you to raise the child alone in the country. You know what? Privately, we all thought you were a single father. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh, but it was a bitter laugh. I'm not a single father, but I'm worse off than a single father. My eyes started to sting, and I quickly put on a smile as I always did, afraid of being noticed. After submitting my resignation letter, Daphne walked in with Ethan. The man walked in front with a gentle smile on his face. Daphne walked behind him, and her eyes never left him. For a moment, my colleague nudged me and whispered, "Lucas, did you see that? Our Daphne is finally showing some affection." I forced a smile, but my heart was pouring with rain. It only takes more than 10 years for an iron tree to bloom. But Daphne, even if I wait for a lifetime, I won't be able to get her to look at me. The moment we passed each other, I couldn't help but call out to her, "Daphne." As soon as I started, the woman gave me a cold look. "Assistant, is there something you need?" Her distant words contained a warning, warning me to swallow what I was going to say, warning me to pay attention to my status. I lowered my eyes and used all my remaining strength to hide my red eyes. "Sorry," Daphne hummed and immediately looked away. She continued to focus on Ethan, as if he was her whole world. She is my wife and the mother of my child. At this moment, she is unabashedly showing her love for another man in front of me. It's ironic and also makes me realize the truth. Thinking of this, I laughed at myself. Originally, I wanted to tell her that I was going to resign. Now, it seems there's no need to say it. After all, she never cared. She doesn't care about my feelings, doesn't care about our child. She cares even less about this marriage that exists only in name. Sitting back at my desk, I received a call from my son on his children's watch. "Dad, there's a parents' meeting tonight, and school gets out early today. Aunt Mia is sending me to you." I was stunned for a moment and instinctively got up and walked outside, but I happened to see Daphne reaching out to fix Ethan's hair. Not far away was my son with his school bag on his back. The little boy stood at the elevator entrance, staring blankly at his mother being intimate with a strange uncle. That kind of tenderness, that kind of patience, my son and I have both seen it. Just as I was about to take him away, Daphne also noticed my son. The woman's body stiffened, and she instinctively withdrew her hand. But the next second, she protected the man and slowly but firmly walked past my son, as if she had never known him. My heart ached, and I quickly took my son's hand and returned to my desk. Before I could explain, my son's eyes turned red, and he asked me, "Dad, is that the person Andy likes?" At that moment, I lost all my strength to speak and could only nod with tears in my eyes. My son didn't ask any more questions and quietly took out his homework and started writing. But his tears still couldn't help but soak the paper. I held my son in my arms. He is also my whole world. "Daphne, you have 2 more chances before my son and I leave." After packing up our things, my son and I were ready to go home. On the way, my son asked me, "Dad, for the parents' meeting tonight, can Andy come?" In the 7 years of our marriage, Daphne has never attended my son's parents' meeting. Looking at his expectant eyes, I couldn't bear to refuse and sent a message to Daphne. "There's a parents' meeting for our son tonight. Are you available?" After sending the message, as usual, there was no response. My son lowered his head, hugged his school bag, and asked me, "She doesn't want to come, does she?" Then, he smiled understandingly and pretended not to care, saying, "It's okay. Auntie is busy. I can understand." Hearing my son's sensible words, my chest felt as if it was being pressed down by a huge stone. It hurt so much that I could hardly breathe. Just as I was about to speak, my phone rang. It was a message from Daphne. "I'm available and will come." A surge of surprise welled up in my heart, and I couldn't wait to show the chat interface to my son. "Did you see that? Mom said she'll come." My son was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately broke into a happy smile. In the 7 years of our marriage, this was the first time Daphne was willing to attend our son's parents' meeting. With Daphne's affirmative reply, my son was excited all the way. He chatted on and on about how many times the teacher had praised him this semester, how many high scores he had gotten in exams, and how many certificates he had received. He also said that he had been elected as the monitor of this semester, and the teacher had promised to announce it at the parents' meeting tonight. Speaking of this, my son asked me, "Dad, When Mom knows how well I've performed at school, she'll like me more, right? I was stunned for a moment, and then felt even more heartbroken. I silently prayed that Daphne wouldn't break her promise. Before we left, I hoped that my son could get what he wished for, even if it was just self-deception on our part. The clock on the wall rang again and again, and the time for the parents' meeting was getting closer and closer. Daphne still hadn't shown up. However, Ethan's WeChat moments was updated. In the photo, the woman was sitting beside a strange little boy, teaching him how to build Lego blocks hand in hand. The caption, "A good mother in the future." I turned my head and looked towards the living room. My 7-year-old son was sitting quietly on the sofa, playing with toys. It was also Lego, the same age, and he also needed company. But by his side, there had never been Daphne, his mother. Sensing my gaze, my son seemed to understand something and asked me, "Dad, is Mom still busy?" I stared blankly into my son's eyes, not daring to tell him that his mother was not busy, but instead accompanying other children. I couldn't say anything. I could only do what I had done many times before. I hugged my son into my arms with a heavy heart and told him, "It's okay. You still have Dad. Dad will always be with you." My son sensibly didn't ask any more questions, but his eyes couldn't help but turn red. On the way to school, we both tacitly didn't mention Daphne anymore. It was as if she had never promised anything, and there had always been only 2 people in this family. "Daphne, you have one more chance left." After parking the car, I held my son's hand and walked into the school, but the moment I stepped into the classroom, I froze in place. "Daphne, Mom." Daphne was sitting by the window. Hearing the sound, she instinctively looked towards us, and her pupils shrank. "Why are you here?" The surprise in her words made me stop in my tracks, and a bad premonition welled up in my heart. My son had been in primary school for half a year, but Daphne didn't even know the name of his class. My son didn't hear clearly and happily ran to the woman's side. "Mom, you..." Daphne frowned. "What did you call me?" The expression on my son's face froze, and then he skillfully changed his address. "Auntie, you're sitting in the wrong seat. My seat is in the front." He looked at Daphne with joy in his eyes. This was the first time Daphne had attended my son's parents' meeting, and it was also the first time she had kept her promise. But this excitement didn't last long. The next second, Daphne avoided his gaze. "I'm not sitting in the wrong seat. This is my seat." My son was stunned for a moment and was about to speak when he was pushed aside by a figure. "Get out of the way. This is my mom." Out of my fatherly instinct, I immediately protected my son in my arms. Daphne also instinctively stood up, but she stopped again when she met Ethan's surprised gaze. Withdrawing her hand, she protected the boy behind her and said, "Daniel didn't mean it." I apologized for him. Both my son and I were stunned. My son had never received such protection and care. "Who is he?" I stood up and asked softly. Daphne was taken aback when she met my gaze. A trace of guilt flashed in her eyes. "He's a friend's child." "Really?" I murmured, but I knew in my heart this was the child in Ethan's photo, the child that Daphne was willing to accompany. Sure enough, the next second, Ethan walked in with a bottle of water. He was very surprised to see us. "Assistant Lucas, are you also here to accompany your child to the parents' meeting? Why isn't the child's mother here?" Hearing this, I instinctively looked at Daphne, but I only saw her evasive eyes. I understood in my heart that she was afraid that I would expose her. In a trance, it was as if I had returned to the day Ethan came back from abroad. That day, the woman who had always been cold got dead drunk for the first time, and for the first time, when she heard my son call her mom, she showed a smile. My son and I thought that we were finally going to wait for happiness, but the next second, the name that Daphne was murmuring was Ethan's. Only then did I realize that she had mistaken someone else for another. I unconsciously tightened my grip on my son's hand. Just as I was about to speak, my son said first, "My mom is not in the country. She's very busy, and I don't want to bother her." With these words, he received shocked looks from 2 people. I couldn't believe it and lowered my head, only to see my son's slightly red eyes. He looked at Daphne and tried hard to raise a sensible smile. "Aunt Daphne, my dad and I are leaving now." At this moment, all the sadness was stuck in my chest. The moment we turned around, Daphne suddenly grabbed me. "What did Julian just say?" Daphne looked at my son in shock, as if to confirm. Was it because the child who she couldn't get rid of before had now taken the initiative to learn to avoid suspicion? I twitched the corners of my mouth and found it extremely ironic. He didn't say anything. The parents' meeting is about to start. I pulled away her hand and took my son to the front and sat down. Even at the moment I sat down, I could still feel the burning gaze coming from behind. But no matter how burning it was, it couldn't warm my heart. The parents' meeting started as scheduled. I hugged my son and for the first time, hoped that the teacher's voice could be stricter to block out the affectionate conversation of that family of three behind us. My son was also specially mentioned by the teacher. As expected, the teacher announced that he had become the monitor of this semester and asked him to go on stage to speak, but my son refused. He didn't want to go on stage, nor did he want to speak. I knew that he didn't want to see the scene of Daphne sitting together with that child. He didn't want to admit that his mother would rather accompany someone else's child to the parents' meeting, and she didn't even want him to call her mom openly. After it was over, I held my son's hand and went to the teacher's office to go through the withdrawal procedures. When we walked out of the school gate, we happened to run into Daphne, who was waiting for someone. She was standing by the roadside as if she had been waiting for a long time. She was still holding a stick of cotton candy in her hand. "Why did you come out so late? Let's go home together," Daphne said and handed the cotton candy in her hand to my son. Going home together. Once, this was the state that my son and I had been looking forward to the most. Now, it just sounded ironic. My son reached out and took the cotton candy from Daphne's hand. His gloomy face finally showed a smile after a whole night. Looking at my son's expectant eyes, my heart softened. Just as I was about to agree, I heard her say, "Ethan's child is a transfer student and didn't participate in the previous class committee competition. Why don't you ask your son to tell the homeroom teacher that he won't be the monitor? This time, give the opportunity to Daniel." With these simple words, both my son and I felt cold-hearted. Sure enough, all gifts have a price secretly marked. Just like this stick of cotton candy, it also came at a cost. "Okay, Aunt Daphne." It was my son's voice with red eyes. He put the cotton candy in his mouth. Daphne's eyes softened slightly. Just as she was about to hold my son's hand, her phone rang. It was Ethan. "Daphne, Daniel is not feeling well. Can you come to us now? I'm so scared." Daphne's face changed, and she immediately turned around and got into the car. The moment she closed the car door, my son suddenly shouted loudly, "Mom!" Daphne's hand that was closing the door paused, and she stuck her head out and met my son's slightly red eyes. After a long silence, she said, "Be careful." This time, she didn't ask my son to change his address. However, this was the last time my son called her mom. That night, my son and I packed our luggage and booked plane tickets to go abroad. We didn't mention Daphne anymore, and there would no longer be a light in the living room that stayed on all night, waiting for her. Early the next morning, my son and I went out with our luggage, checked in, and boarded the plane. Before turning off my phone, I sent Daphne one last message: "I wish you happiness." The next second, the chat box that had been silent for a long time started shaking wildly. My finger lingered over the power off button for a long time and didn't press it down. It wasn't that I was hesitating whether to leave or not, but I was wondering if leaving in such an anticlimactic way was really the best choice. Julian noticed my hesitation, tugged at my sleeve, and lowered his head to remind me in a muffled voice, "Dad, it's time for us to go." Looking at the eagerness in his eyes, I suddenly understood everything. Obviously, I also knew before that Daphne wasn't a good person, knew that she didn't love me, and knew that this marriage was a complete mistake, but I still indulged in it without hesitation because at that time I really loved her. Now, I have someone I love even more. That is my child. I can no longer think about having an amicable separation or a prodigal returning to the fold. What I need to do is hold my son's hand and stride forward. I turned off my phone and looked at my son's tender face. It seemed that my heart was occupied by an inexplicable force. It was warmer than the illusory love. "Let's go, Dad. And you are going to start a new life in the company." Daphne frowned more and more tightly as she looked at the power-off prompt tone on the screen. Yesterday, she rushed over in a hurry, only to find that Daniel just had a stomachache because he was clamoring for ice cream. When she finally soothed Daniel and was about to go back to school, she realized that it was already too late. Neither my son nor I waited for her. Originally, in the car, she had thought of many reasons for explanation in her mind, but when she saw the empty street, instead of feeling relieved, she felt an empty feeling in her heart. It was as if the person she had firmly believed would always be there suddenly left. Thinking of this, Daphne suddenly laughed. How could it be possible? How could Lucas be willing to leave her? He wouldn't be willing to. Back in the car, Daphne drove straight to the company. Just like many times before, facing her own mistakes, she chose to run away and let time heal everything. 7 years ago, when she found out that she had taken the initiative to seduce me while drunk, it was like 7 years later when she heard our child for Ethan. It was also like this. The phone rang. It was Ethan. Daphne, where are you? Can you come and accompany me? I'm so scared. His voice was very gentle, the kind of gentle and refined manner that Daphne liked the most, completely different from Lucas. Listening to the phone, Daphne couldn't help but think of what happened 7 years ago. That flustered night, no one knew that she was sober. She soberly walked into the wrong room, soberly pulled me onto the bed, and soberly did things that an unconscious person couldn't do. As for why, Daphne's hand gripping the steering wheel kept tightening, and a dark look flashed in her eyes. Because I was too shining, like a sun. I was earnest, diligent, positive, and upward. All the beautiful words seemed to be applicable to me. Especially when I looked at her, my eyes were shining brightly, making her almost lose her composure several times. But it was precisely this brilliance that she was afraid of. She was afraid that just like she couldn't keep Ethan, she couldn't keep me either. So, when she woke up the next day, she pretended not to know anything and used the worst tone to stimulate and belittle me. She made me feel uneasy, guilty, and doubtful of myself. Only in this way would I be willing to stay by her side. The more she showed that she didn't love me, the more humble I became. She used such means for 7 years. When the green light came on, a glint flashed in Daphne's eyes, and she drove away from the intersection. Back at the company, just as Daphne was about to lie down, her phone lit up. This time, it was a text message. I wish you happiness. Sender, Lucas. Bang. Daphne kicked the tea table beside her, and her face turned gloomy. Lucas, what do you mean? Are you crazy? Who gave you the guts to say such things? There was no reply. Daphne stood up and ran towards the parking lot while calling me. Beep. The user you dialed is powered off. Damn it. The woman cursed a few words and opened the car door. Lucas, answer the phone. Still, no one replied. The wind was very strong at night, but it couldn't blow away the fear in Daphne's heart. It had been half an hour, and I still didn't pay attention to her. In the 7 years of our marriage, this was the first time. No matter how late it was before, as long as she made a phone call, I would immediately get up and rush to her side, even if it meant pulling her out of the arms of a strange man. Thinking of what happened tonight, Daphne pursed her thin lips. Could it be that she had been too harsh on me? Her breathing became a little calmer, and the corners of her mouth involuntarily turned up. It seemed that I was really jealous this time. Well, this time, she thought, she would lower her head and coax me properly. However, she still had to teach me a lesson, lest I become too complacent in the future. Looking at the villa that was getting closer and closer, Daphne suppressed the excitement in her heart and regained her usual coldness. When she walked into the courtyard and looked at the villa without a single ray of light, Daphne sneered. This time, it finally looked a bit like a proper act. Pushing open the door, the woman's cold and magnificent voice echoed in the villa. Lucas, I'm back. There was no reply. Daphne's face darkened, but she still suppressed the uneasiness in her heart. Tisk, stop pretending, Lucas. If you don't come down, I'll take back this chance to make up. Lucas. Daphne finally couldn't hold back. She took 3 steps at a time and ran upstairs. Pushing open the bedroom door, there was no one in the bed. Damn it. She turned around and went to Julian's room and pushed the door open. My patience is, there was no one there either. In the room full of childlike innocence, there was only an unfinished Lego set on the ground. It indicated that the owner left without any hesitation. Stumbling to the Lego set, Daphne recognized it. This was what she bought for her son 9 days after his 6th birthday. Just like before, on her son's birthday, Daphne deliberately made an appointment with her friends to fool around in the bar until the early morning. My son and I waited for her hour after hour and made call after call. We waited until the birthday cake melted and the bell rang at 12 o'clock. Then, she came home drunk with the smell of alcohol all over her. That night, looking at my son's bloodshot eyes, I lost my temper with her for the first time. And what about Daphne? She looked at me sarcastically and said, Lucas, who do you think you are? If you hadn't schemed to climb into my bed back then, do you think you could have this child and live in this house? Lucas, one should be content. She watched as I was once again choked by her words and began to doubt myself again, feeling proud in her heart. So, 9 days after her son's birthday, she took out the gift she had prepared as a reward. A reward for another discipline of me and my son. But now, my son and I were gone without any omen, without looking back. Daphne covered her face and slumped to the ground feebly. Everything was out of control. The phone rang again. Daphne suddenly sat up and picked up the phone. Lucas, you. Daphne. Ethan's voice came through the phone. Daphne's face darkened, and there was no longer the usual tenderness. What's up? Ethan was taken aback, as if a bit surprised, but still continued. Daphne, the water pipe in our house is broken, and Daniel and I don't know what to do now. Can you help us? How can I help? Ethan felt a bit embarrassed and stammered. I was thinking, if it's possible to stay at your house for a while. You have some nerve to think so. Daphne laughed, and her voice was astonishingly cold. Now that my son and I were gone, Ethan was no longer of any value, so she didn't bother to pretend anymore. Ethan, I thought you were a smart person. The breath on the other end of the phone caught, and he asked in disbelief, Daphne, what did you say? Daphne raised her head, looking at the drawing left by her son on the wall, and said in a low voice, Ethan, what makes you think that I would want a man who has betrayed me, especially a second-hand one? Something fell to the ground, indicating the restlessness of the person on the other side. Daphne didn't bother to listen anymore and directly hung up the phone. She lay on the ground until dawn. She finally managed to fall asleep, but was woken up by a phone call from the company. Something's wrong. The client for the project that Assistant Lucas was in charge of before has suddenly gone back on their word, and now the project is stuck. Please come quickly. Daphne frowned and instinctively replied. Then call Assistant Lucas and ask him to solve it. The manager was stunned for a second and said, Daphne, Assistant Lucas has already resigned. Now we can't get in touch with him either. Daphne opened her eyes and looked shocked. Resigned? Who approved his resignation? Why didn't I know about it? A series of questions made the manager a bit dazed. Assistant Lucas said that his wife works in the United States, and he wants to take his child to the United States to be with his family. So he submitted his resignation letter, and it was all approved according to the process. Didn't you know, Daphne? Daphne was stunned. She did find the resignation letter on the computer before, but at that time, Ethan was pestering her to talk about something, so she didn't pay attention and approved it without even looking at it. Thinking of this, she clenched her fists, filled with regret. It was all that man's fault. If it weren't for him. Damn it. But the next second, she quickly grasped the key point in the manager's words. Did they go to the United States? The manager nodded. Yes. Assistant Lucas said he wanted to take the opportunity to further his studies. After hanging up the phone, Daphne immediately booked a flight ticket to the United States. In this life, you will never be able to escape from me. On the other side, in the United States, thanks to the little bit of conscience that Daphne still had left in the 7 years of our marriage, the assets in my hands were quite substantial. Enough for me to quickly settle down with my son in this strange place. After having a good sleep, I took my son to briefly get to know the surrounding neighbors. If nothing unexpected happens, this will be our home from now on. To be honest, before coming to the United States, I always thought that getting a divorce was a big deal. I thought that leaving Daphne, I would be heartbroken and extremely painful. After arriving in the United States, I suddenly realized it turned out that not having to wait for a woman to come home was so joyful and so relaxing. I no longer had to get up early in the morning to make breakfast for Daphne, nor did I have to endure her cold words. I no longer had to smell the lingering perfume on her clothes, and while being angry, I would coldly throw them into the washing machine. I found that getting a divorce was actually so refreshing. Even my son, who had always wanted to get close to Daphne before, couldn't help but exclaim after seeing the steaming food on the table. Dad, it would have been great if we had left Andy earlier. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh, but my heart felt sour. Daphne is a bad woman and even more of a scumbag. Obviously, she has never fulfilled any of her responsibilities as a mother, yet she always likes to rely on her status as a mother to boss me and my son around. For example, don't eat junk food, don't talk while eating, Don't let the chopsticks knock over the bowls and dishes, and so on. Once, my son didn't follow these rules. She would say, "Lucas, I really don't know how you're being a father. Can't you even teach the most basic manners?" I was so used to being suppressed by her before that every time at such moments, I could only feebly say, "Sorry." Now that I don't love her anymore, I just want to say to her, "You're talking nonsense." Thinking of this, I kissed my son's little face, and my smile was full of anticipation. "Julian, we will definitely get better and better in the future." My son nodded, showing his missing tooth with a bright smile. "I believe in you, Dad." Just as we were having fun, the doorbell rang. "Lucas, open the door." Daphne's hoarse voice came from outside the door. In an instant, my son and I both involuntarily put away the smiles on our faces. I wasn't surprised that she found us so quickly. After all, we haven't officially divorced yet, and many things are still tied together. My son looked at me uneasily and called out in a low voice, "Dad, Auntie she?" I stroked his head. "Dad needs to have a good talk with Auntie. Why don't you go upstairs and play for a while?" "Okay." My son hesitated for a moment and then nodded in agreement. After he went upstairs, I opened the door. Daphne's face looked a bit haggard, as if she hadn't slept at all, and there were some faint stubbles on her lips. It was completely different from her usual image as a financial elite. When she saw me, Daphne immediately showed her anger. "Lucas, you've got some nerve. How dare you not answer my calls? Do you believe that I—" "Yes," I said directly. Daphne's words got stuck in her throat. She stared at me intently, as if looking for my former weakness, but she was destined to be disappointed. I was weak because I loved her. Now that I don't love her anymore, the brains I lost have grown back. I smiled and stepped aside to motion for her to come in. After all, this is the place where my son and I plan to settle down. I don't want others to know that my ex-wife is a crazy person. Sitting down on the sofa, Daphne looked around and sneered. "Is this the kind of place you can only live in after leaving me?" I also smiled. "There's no other way. I don't need to rush to be a mother to my ex's child, so of course I can afford to live here." My words were sharp, but Daphne laughed. She looked at me with a look of certainty in her eyes. "Sure enough, you're still jealous. Considering that you've been with me for 7 years, I can give you a chance. Come back to our country with me, and I'll let bygones be bygones." My hand holding the coffee trembled. I swear, I really wanted to pour the boiling coffee in the pot onto her face, to see how thick her skin really is. But I still held back. It really wasn't worth going to jail for such a scumbag. Putting down the coffee, I took out the printed divorce agreement from the drawer and threw it on the table. As the paper slid across the table, I remembered that Daphne used to do the same, casually throwing documents at me. People who didn't know might think she had Parkinson's disease. Now it's my turn, and it really feels good. Daphne's eyebrows twitched, but she still picked up the document from the ground. Looking at the 4 big characters, "divorce agreement," on it, the arrogance on her face finally disappeared. "Lucas, are you serious?" I nodded. "Otherwise." Daphne's pupils shrank, and then she forced a calm smile. "Lucas, stop making a fuss. I know you're just angry with Ethan. Don't worry, as long as you come back with me, I'll never contact him again." She said it so confidently, as if she was really sincere, but I didn't care anymore. I took the divorce agreement and turned to the last page. "I've already signed my name. I won't argue with you about the property during the marriage. Besides the property under my name, you give me 50 million yuan in a lump sum. From now on, my son and I will definitely not bother you to enjoy your life anymore." I thought that since I had made such a big concession, she should be satisfied, right? After all, as long as she can buy out these connections with money, it's a good deal for both her and me. But Daphne became even angrier. She snatched the divorce agreement and tore it into pieces. "I don't agree to the divorce, Lucas. You'll never be able to leave me." Looking at her blood-red eyes, I was suddenly stunned, and a feeling I had never expected welled up in my heart. "You couldn't be reluctant to part with me, could you?" Even as I said it, I felt like laughing, but Daphne fell silent. She swallowed hard, as if her disguise had been torn apart, and a look of guilt and bewilderment appeared in her eyes. It was a long time before she let out a hum. I suddenly laughed, laughing until tears came out. A huge sense of absurdity completely enveloped me. "Daphne, you like me? You actually like me? Hee, you actually like me?" Daphne pursed her lips and reached out her hand towards me. "Don't touch me." I forcefully slapped her hand away, my eyes cold. Daphne, you disgust me. The woman was stunned, and then she couldn't believe it. Lucas, what did you say? I said you disgust me. Daphne was completely enraged. Lucas, are you crazy? How can you talk to me like this? You clearly loved you very much, right? I wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, regained my calm, and walked step by step in front of Daphne. Yes, Daphne, I used to love you very much. But I'm a human being, not your toy. By what right do you think you can rely on my love to act recklessly and hurt me again and again? By what right do you think that after you hurt me, if you say you love me, I have to obediently forgive you and come back to you? By what right do you think that I still love you? By what right? As I stepped closer step by step, Daphne also stepped back step by step until she hit the soft sofa and slumped down on it feebly. She hadn't seen me in such a determined manner for a long time. She hadn't seen it since that night. In a trance, she remembered the time when she interviewed me. She asked me, Lucas, your resume is not particularly outstanding, and you don't have relevant industry experience either. Why do you want to apply for our company? Why what do you think we will hire you? And I replied, because I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to endure hardship. I'm not afraid of challenges or difficulties. As long as you give me a chance, I will definitely make you look at me in a new light. 7 years later, I really made her look at me differently. That confident and determined boy, after going through 7 years of trials and tribulations, stood in front of her again, more tenacious than before. But she no longer had the chance to keep him. Her drooping hand gradually clenched into a fist, making her heart ache. Looking at the speechless woman, a trace of disdain and irony flashed in my eyes. The disdain was for Daphne, and the irony was for myself for having indulged in the nightmare fabricated by such a person for 7 years. 7 years. How many 7-year periods are there in a person's life? It was just wasted like this. While I was lost in thought, Daphne suddenly said, What about our son? What? I didn't react at once. Daphne raised her head, her eyes filled with madness. If you want to divorce me, I won't give you the custody of our son. From now on, I won't let you see him either. Are you really sure about your decision, you? I glared at Daphne, feeling that she was like an evil spirit. Daphne twitched the corners of her mouth, as if she had found my weakness. As long as you come back with me, I will definitely treat you and our son well in the future, and we will have a happy family. Lucas, do you have the heart to let our son grow up without a father? She looked at me, and the pride in her eyes was almost overflowing. This time, it was my turn to panic. Just as I was about to speak, a childish voice came from upstairs. You're dreaming. My son rushed downstairs angrily and said in a hoarse voice, I only recognize Dad. You're not my mom. I don't have a mom like you. He pointed at Daphne, and his face, which was 5 parts similar to hers, was filled with anger and fear. He was afraid that he would never see me again. He was also afraid that I would compromise for his sake and go back to that hellish home. Daphne's face was stern, and her voice was cold and firm. It's not up to you. My son wiped away his tears as if he had made up his mind. Dad, don't worry about me. Divorce Mom. His hand holding mine trembled slightly, but he continued, Dad, I can take care of myself. Don't worry about me. When I grow up, I'll come to find you. At that moment, I was in so much pain that I felt like I was about to die. If my child treated me badly, I could give up without hesitation, but Julian wasn't like that. From the moment he was born, we had supported each other. He was not only my child, but also my family. For him, I was willing to give everything. Thinking of this, an idea in my heart gradually became clear. Okay, I promise you. My son immediately turned his head and cried, asking me not to go back, but Daphne immediately laughed out loud and rushed into my arms, eagerly crying tears of joy. Lucas, I'll treat you well, I promise. I held back the urge to vomit and stiffly let her do as she pleased. Daphne, you should remember that you were the one who pushed things to the limit first, so in the future, don't blame me. After returning to our home country, Daphne really seemed like a different person. She not only stopped contacting Ethan, but also changed her former coldness and became extremely enthusiastic towards me and my son. She almost fulfilled every request, but my son and I didn't appreciate it. Just like she used to be, we were indifferent to her. When we were returning to the country, my son almost cried himself into a faint, especially when boarding the plane. He even bit Daphne's wrist, trying to make her let go of the hand that was holding me back. I felt very sorry for him, but I couldn't find an opportunity to explain to my son. It wasn't until we returned to the country that I found the opportunity to explain to my son and asked him to give me some time. I would handle everything well. Daphne didn't know what I was thinking. She just thought that she had me in her grasp and became even more conceited. Moreover, the fact that I had previously brought up the divorce had really scared her, so she provided a lot of conveniences. I asked her to restore my position in the company. While going to work, I secretly collected the company's customer resources. At the same time, I spent a large sum of money hiring a detective to keep a close eye on Ethan. Daphne was the best stepping stone that Ethan could reach, and he wouldn't give up easily. Sure enough, within half a month, Ethan couldn't hold back anymore. He didn't dare to blame Daphne, so he put all his anger and hatred on me. He believed that as long as my son and I were dead, he could replace me and rise to power. After receiving the news that Ethan had hired someone to cause a car accident, I realized that the opportunity had finally come. So, first, I made an excuse that the car needed maintenance and let Daphne drive my car away. Then, I said I had to work overtime and asked Daphne to pick up our son. In fact, I had already asked for leave for my son and sent him to learn painting. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the news of the car accident came. On her way home from school, Daphne collided with a van. Her life and death were unknown. When I received the news from the hospital, I took out the divorce agreement from the drawer and smiled. Originally, I really just wanted 50 million yuan, and that would be it. Unfortunately, you were not satisfied. The doctor diagnosed that Daphne's leg was useless, and she became disabled. During her recuperation period, I announced that I was her husband and temporarily took over her position, becoming the new head of the company. As for Daphne, she couldn't accept the fact that she was disabled and became more and more irritable. Throwing and breaking things became a common occurrence. Both the doctors and the nurses had a lot of complaints. I understood how hard they worked, so a month after Daphne was hospitalized, I transferred her to a nursing home. More than half of the patients here had mental illnesses, which was very suitable for her. Half a year later, I completely took over all the affairs of the company. Daphne also went completely crazy. However, we didn't get a divorce after all. This was what she had always wanted. So I just inherited all her property in the capacity of her husband. By the way, I used her money to get to know many young people who were more beautiful and gentler than her. You see, that's why people should be content. Contentment brings happiness.